Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for appearing today. Mr Chisholm, I'll read the figures again that we compiled in my office from those read out by the telcos this morning of handsets that are going to be defunct. They're not going to be compatible after 3G is gone. The total of handsets is 465,000. The total of other devices is 608,000, which leaves a total of 1,073,000. So I'm pleased, very pleased, to hear you say that the Minister is basically aware of her powers to delay the 3G shutdown. You said that there is opportunity for regulatory intervention. What are those powers specifically?
Yes, Senator, thanks for the question. There's a couple of elements here. One is, so ACMA itself, the regulator, has responsibility for the telecommunications emergency call service determination, which requires carriers and carriage service providers to maintain proper functioning of the 000 service. So that's one element of it, and so that's something that certainly government and regulator is focused on in terms of continuity of 000 service post the switchover. The Minister potentially has options for regulatory intervention, and the issue there comes down to the question of the carrier licence conditions for mobile network operators under the Telecommunications Act. The Act enables the Minister to consider carrier licence conditions, and that was used in the past, and my colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, in the context of that transition we talked about before from CDMA to 2G. The then Minister made a decision to delay that transition using a similar tool, similar powers. Is that right? Yeah.
That's great.
Yep. So that's what we're talking about there.
So thank you for that, and I'm pleased there's a precedent and you're aware of it. Now, coming back to the emergency call provisions and ACMA, it seems to me from our session with ACMA this morning that they're reluctant to get involved. What are the steps? Does your department, does the Minister notify ACMA? Does ACMA then follow suit?
It can happen in a couple of ways, and I think on that point, and Senator, I think this is where the broader piece of work being done on 000 and the outcomes of the review from the Optus outage are quite relevant. So I just might ask Ms Soleri to talk about what ACMA is doing and what the government is doing on that front.
Thanks, Senator. As you heard this morning, the ACMA has responsibility for the emergency call service determination, which broadly sets out the rules and arrangements to ensure that when you call 000, you get through. Yeah. One of the things that when we looked at the ecosystems that supports 000 as a result of the Optus outage, we found that there were a number of gaps and flaws in that ecosystem, whether that be through formal arrangements, informal arrangements, processes, or the actual rules. Many of the recommendations from that review, of which there are 18 in total, many of those are aimed at improving the rules around the ecosystem and particularly the emergency call service determination. In the government response to the review, the Minister indicated that she will be directing the ACMA to review the emergency call service determination, and I can advise that we're currently consulting on a draft of that direction. Not only does it look at issues identified in the Optus outage, it's also looking at issues that we've learnt through this 3G closure process.
Oh, that's very refreshing to hear.
So one of the things that we're most concerned about is if it's considered that the rules in the determination do not require that all calls to 000 be carried, then it should. Yeah. And that's where we're heading. Okay,
so you're updating literally in real time, from yesterday and today.
The Minister will direct the ACMA in a very short period of time, and the ACMA will conduct that work.
Okay, thank you. Because Europeans seem to be only just now waking. I've referenced James Parker's submission and his testimony yesterday many times in this hearing. It has been quite a revelation. But it seems to me that France is deferring until late this decade, 2028, I think. Britain continues to use 2G, 3G, as do other countries. South Africa similarly. So they seem to be waking. So we're in good company. They seem to be waking, so it's not as though you've dropped the ball. I was going to focus on who knew what when, but I think the Senator Sterle and Senator Canavan have asked those questions. What have you learned from that, Mr Chisholm, or your staff? Because one of the things that has happened is that TPG's already bolted. They've flown the coop, and that's very disappointing here to read. But I understand that TPG has a relationship with Optus, which enables it to get access to 3G anyway, so they haven't really bolted. But I don't want to see Telstra and Optus bolt.
Yeah, so, Senator, you're right in the sense that TPG transitioned early this year, January, and they have the capability of their 000 calls camping on to Optus and Telstra or Optus? It's Optus. Both. So that the potential impact associated with a switch from 3G for 000 isn't really being kind of experienced in the case of TPG because of that link.
Exactly.
Optus and Telstra are engaging quite extensively with TPG and TPG with Optus and Telstra. To ensure that those customers are identified and are supported in advance of any transition. But you are correct that the potential impact of that has been muted because of the camping on capabilities that exist there.
So what actions have you implemented from... You convened a meeting, I think, with the industry early this year, February, which seems to me horribly late, but I think the industry has been keeping you out of the loop somehow, because
Senator Roberts, can we just add that we have had quarterly reporting from industry from around 2021, and we requested, due to some of the issues that we saw coming through that reporting late last year, much more granular reporting. That reporting has been useful, and in something similar you might seek the granular reporting earlier. We also have the work that's already underway through the Bean Review, which will address some of the risks that we've seen coming through the 3G shutdown as well. So that's already underway, as Mr Larry's outlined.
Yeah, thank you, Ms Lourens.
So, Senator, I'll just add to that evidence that the thing that I've been sort of looking at here is the point that was made earlier that there was this strong focus for some time, stretching back to 2021, on the reporting and service equivalence. It was really only late last year that the question of a proportion of devices not able to make emergency services calls was being raised. This is despite the fact that we were getting very regular, at some point, quarterly reporting, which is now obviously much more intensive reporting from industry. And then in December last year, Telstra, in its quarterly report, indicated that there were some devices and older handsets that were potentially impacted, and that Telstra, Optus and TPG were working together to look at that. And it was then in early this year, so following on from that, that we undertook a range of our own analysis and wrote out to the companies, and the Minister commissioned the working group and a number of the reporting mechanisms that sit under that. So, yeah, we obviously do depend on industry giving us the information that we need to advise government and to communicate with the community about the impacts of these changes. And it's fair to say that as soon as we started to get a sense that there were devices that were going to be impacted that weren't previously identified, we did ramp up our engagement and put in place more regular reporting, and the Minister has now written on a number of occasions to industry and met with the companies to seek updates from them, and as I say, is aware of regulatory options that are available to her.
Well, thank you for that, and that's very encouraging and reassuring. I know that, I think it was Ms Lawrence said that reporting started under the Morrison government, quarterly reporting April 2021. It was initially just Telstra when Telstra was asked, and it was specifically about 3G switchover or shutdown and 4G coverage. Then in May 2023, you added Optus to the party, your department.
Minister Rollins, yeah. Yep.
Minister Rollins, thank you very much. So rather than be embarrassed by your lack of action, you've actually taken action to ramp it up when you started becoming concerned.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And so I think quantifying it was an important part of that. Because quantifying it.
Exactly, the data. Wonderful.
So we became aware of the scale, and as the mobile network operators gave evidence this morning, they also became aware of the scale around that time with the collective questions. We took that to the Minister when we got it in February this year, and the late February, and the Minister acted quite quickly along with us to establish that working group and that fortnightly reporting, which has the information that we've discussed today on the different device types and numbers. Okay,
perhaps jumping the gun a bit here, if you defer or if you intervene, then perhaps there could be an objective threshold criteria which has to be met by the telcos, specified by your department or by the Minister, to say when you achieve this level of surety or this level of conversion, so that there's no people left behind when 3G shuts down, then and only then will they shut it down. Or maybe this is such a mammoth exercise, looking at the number of devices, that you make an indefinite extension.
Yeah, and Senator, that very much goes to that question of obtaining assurance that, particularly when it comes to handsets, that 000 calls will be able to be made. And that has been our fundamental concern in relation to devices, which is that the switch will happen when it happens, and people will still be able to make phone calls on some of those devices, but 000 calls won't work, and that's not acceptable for the government.
No, and it'll be interesting to know if you can give us one day, if you can give us a deadline by when we'll know every lift in every airport is okay. Because until then, I don't think we can afford to swap, shut it down. And as I said, we're in good company. We've got some leading operators in Europe now recognising that the core issue here is an industry failure to address the root causes, which are serious 4G compatibility issues, and still relying upon 3G. I mean, I thought this whole exercise was just about regional access and safety and productivity and environment. But I've learned, just in the space of 48 hours, that it's a hell of a lot more and much more serious. And it raises questions, including of the Minister and the Department. But it seems like you've got that covered. So now we'll have to be watching what the Minister does in the future to protect Australians.
And Senator, can I just add to that one of the things that we have found, and we will provide the list of critical industry peak bodies that we've contacted. I will add that this list isn't exhaustive. So,
excuse me, when did you contact them?
So we have contacted them over we'd have to check the time frame, probably over the last 12 months.
So it's not just since you become concerned, because I noted here that in February this year you started getting more detailed numbers, and that coincides with your first elevated meeting.
Yeah, so February this year was that breadth and that particular focus on that 000 issue.
And just to sort of give you a sense of it, Senator, we have been very broad with who. This list includes water or sewerage services, energy companies, healthcare and hospitals, universities, food and groceries. We've talked about transport, infrastructure companies, defence, transport, space technology. So we have gone very broadly in terms of sectors that we've reached out to, and we'll continue to do that work as part of the information we need to gather for advising the minister.
That's good news, because one of the things I've done is I went through the submissions yesterday and the witness statements, and went through particularly Mr Parker's submissions and his summary statements, and I came up with 5 sets of questions. The fourth one was his belief that there has been insufficient oversight from the Minister, the Department, ACCC, ACMA, media, but I can see now that there hasn't been insufficient. It's been, you're ramping it up, which is good to see. So I think the final thing we need from I've got more questions, but the final thing we need from your department or the minister is a quantified threshold saying when that's reached, only then can you move on and shut 3G. And even better, if part of that threshold is a specification that they will sort out the 4G compatibility issues, because that seems to be the core problem. The rest is smoke and mirrors. Not on your part, but I think on the industry's part they're playing footloose here.
And Senator Roberts, through that working group, there has been a lot of work undertaken to understand the different devices and share that information, and we'll continue to work with ACMA on those device standards as well.
On the compatibility issues?
Yeah, the standards for devices being able to operate, and goes to the 000 issue in particular.
Because I understand there's GSMA and GSM, which provide advice or hints rather than hard standards globally, and the European countries are now starting to wake up to the fact that they're not in compliance with them. It seems like the same applies here.
So we're aware of Mr Parker's submission, and we've gone through that, and we'll make sure that issues in it that are relevant are raised.
Sorry, what was that last sentence?
We'll make sure that if there are issues in there that are relevant, that they are raised. Most of them there's already an awareness of.
You already are aware. Yeah. So there's hope that not only will 3G not continue until it's safe to do so, but also the compatibility issues, the core issue, that's going to be addressed by your department, or make sure that the industry addresses it.
It's under consideration to see what there is to be addressed. Some of the issues that are raised are already, there's things in progress, or some of the characterisation by Mr Parker, it's a little bit different. But we will work with ACMA on that.
Who is ultimately responsible when if it proceeds and is a commercial disaster, or people's lives are threatened, or even deaths occur because of failures? Is it the department? Is it the minister? Is it the telcos, or all the above?
So, Senator, I think at the end of the day, the companies have responsibilities to their customers associated with that switch. So that's one set of responsibilities. Industries themselves that have represent organisations or individuals with devices who are aware of the transition have a responsibility to ensure that that communication effort is being amplified and undertaken. And the government...
So, excuse me, let me just check my understanding.
Yep.
You're saying the telcos are responsible, and you are responsible for making sure they're responsible.
We're responsible for... The role we have taken is twofold. Well, I guess threefold. One is to get to the bottom of the information, like how many numbers of devices are affected, where are those devices...
and with due respect, also the compatibility issue is the core issue.
Absolutely. So that's something that's very relevant. So that's one part of what we do. The other part of what we do is to, as I say, amplify and ensure that people are aware of this. So we have seen...
Which people? You mean customers?
So customers, some of the industries we've talked about here this morning. So we've reached out, as part of the reaching out effort and talking to these industries, there are times where we found that they are well aware of it. Mm-hmm. There are other times we find that they are less aware of it. So we've seen our job as bringing that information to the broadest set of information or broadest set of groups as possible.
Together with the industry.
And then thirdly, I would say, and this is which very much comes to your question, at the end of the day, we provide advice back to government about all of those issues and the potential recourse available under legislation to respond to that issue.
One of the things I think it's not sufficient to say we're going to switch over in 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. That doesn't cut it, because a lot of people think, well, I've got my latest phone, it's 5G, 4G, whatever, and they think that's sweet, but they don't know about the embedded devices all through their businesses, hundreds of the darn things, or the lifts in the airport. And I think that's the critical step that the telcos have failed on, because it's quite clear, whether it be the small family ombudsman, family enterprise, small business family enterprise ombudsman this morning, or other groups, that has come through loud and clear. A lot of people don't know they're exposed here, and they're relying upon you to protect them, and so I think that's another part. Perhaps I could just go to something else to see if you're aware. Mr. Parker, I'm pleased to see that you're going to be reading his paper in detail. You already have.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm trying to advertise it because I was seriously impressed by it. He deserves a medal. The industry is. This is one of the summaries from his 2 pages of summary. The industry is sacrificing public interest for commercial interest. And I'm not accusing the telcos of being corrupt or. I think they're probably swept up in the groupthink, and he said specifically, more handset sales, very alluring. More telco sales, very alluring. More revenue for associated industry, very alluring. And under such circumstances, people can get swept along and think it's all honky-dory when they don't really look. And I'm pleased to see that you are looking. Now, he also mentioned that the industry could likely be suffering from a lack of an under-expectation on a shortfall on recouping their 5G investment, and they're looking to spur along 5G sales. So, in other words, it's more commercially beneficial, as he says, to sell people new phones than updates to existing devices, but the key is the existing updates to existing devices. So I think we've got an industry sacrificing safety and customers instead of fixing the standardisation issues at the moment.
So, Senator, I guess we don't really have a. I would be reluctant to express an opinion about the broader investment and commercial considerations that might be relevant to, the telecommunications companies' considerations here. There's a whole set of issues there that are probably best directed to them. And I'm aware of the points you've raised there. I guess I would just come back to what our fundamental focus is. Irrespective of the motivations of the transition, it must address the concerns and considerations that we've outlined here today about public safety and about ensuring that we don't have any of the risks realised that we've talked about, here today.
And if I can add, that has very much been the focus of that working group, and the 3 mobile network operators have been participating in all of those working group meetings and outlining what they're doing to contact affected consumers and industry groups.
I think there is a consumer protection. That's officially ACCC's role, but surely as part of your oversight of the telcos, that's part of your role as well, to make sure telcos are...
And Senator, we have been communicating with regulators as well, ACMA and the ACCC. As I say, we're providing advice to the Minister, but one of the key roles of government in any of these industry transition issues, particularly where you've got this question of potential safety impacts, is to reach as many people as we possibly can.
Well, not only reach them, but make sure they understand.
Absolutely. Reach them, make sure they understand, and then if there's a view that some of those technical issues you've outlined haven't been properly addressed, or we can't be confident that they'll be addressed, then that will certainly be relevant to our advice back to government.
I think we need to see a position where the telcos can guarantee every truck with a 3G tracker has been contacted. Every piece of farm equipment, as Senator Canavan said, every holder of that equipment has been contacted, and every airport, every lift will work. So I also understand that in relation to the emergency calls determination, ACMA testified that a certain network, such as 3G, not being available to make emergency calls would not breach the rules. So is that the case?
Do you mind just repeating the question, Senator? Sorry.
In relation to the emergency calls determination, ACMA testified that a certain network, such as 3G, not being available to make emergency calls would not breach the rules.
I think there's a requirement under the rules to ensure that 000 calls are able to be made, and it doesn't focus on whether it's 3G or 4G. However, our focus is in ensuring that 000 calls can be made as part of the transition anyway. Yeah.
Yes, Senator, I think the interpretation, the ACMA has taken a certain interpretation of the existing determination, which is why the Minister is currently considering the direction to them to review to make it beyond doubt that calls must be carried to 000. If I could just add something separately, and it's one of the issues you've touched on around device compatibility. An additional recommendation arising from the Optus outage review was around the requirement, I think it's recommendation 3, which is mandates that there must be 6 monthly testing across devices and networks for end-to-end interoperability to ensure that a call can be carried from one network to another regardless of the device. So that testing requirement is currently being developed by the Industry Association, Communications Alliance, under request from the ACMA. So that's a further measure that will ensure that going forward, handsets and networks will be configured in a way that calls will be carried to 000.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe my staff's just been through the proceedings from today and getting some of the details. As I said, with more than a million devices not compatible after 3G is removed, maybe they meant that some networks rely still on 3G. So, one of the things that surprised me today was that, well, maybe it didn't surprise me. The Optus representative, Mr. Pickard, I think it was, said that Optus was not aware of the size of the impact until February 24. How it is that a company the size of Optus, with the customer reach it's got and the responsibility it's got, can make a decision to shut down and then not be aware until a few months before the deadline, that's really chilling.
And I understand that was in relation to that quantifying the 000 devices that appeared to work but wouldn't, and that came to light for industry in the second half of last year, and that was that process that I've gone through a couple of times with quantifying it. So industry...
So you're saying it's to their credit that they've opened up and found it?
Once they were aware of the problem, to then understand how many people were affected. That is an issue that came to light last year, the 000 issue.
It was pretty embarrassing.
We are running short of time, so Senator Roberts, do you have any more? That's it.